February 24th, 2016. Tonight, we are going to be hearing several pieces of legislation, most of them relating to animal husbandry and care. During the hearing, the sponsors of the bill will be called up, they will describe the bills, and then we will call witnesses up. Due to the nature and similarity of several of the bills, we have given you the option of testifying on more than one bill. So we have bills relating to animal hoarding, they are together as a group. Other bills relating to animal shelters, they are also in a group of 3. So at this time, we're going to hear the first group of bills. And ladies and gentlemen, just for the knowledge of folks that are here, witnesses, and also individuals watching at home, there are several committees running simultaneously. So one committee is taking a vote right now across the hall. You are going to see some of those members coming in, and also you may see 1 or 2 leaving during this time as votes come up in other committees. So at this time, I would like to call Representative Solomon and Representative Falella up to describe the legislation that they have submitted. And Representative Falella, we'll start with you, ladies first. No. And Representative Solomon, you can come up as well. Representative Falella, welcome, please.
Thank you.
Welcome, and please proceed. My microphone wasn't on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee for hearing this bill tonight. This bill was put in last year, and I know we had some concerns. This is H7083. This act would require that animal shelters meet a certain conditions prior to euthanizing an animal. It seems easy. It seems like it's like a no-brainer type of thing, but there are some concerns, and I know Defenders of Animals, who had asked me to put the bill in, is here tonight, and we think that hopefully, with some of his language that he's gone over, that we've talked about, that hopefully that maybe we can work at maybe a sub-A out. I know there are some other concerns from some of the animal shelters, and which I've been speaking to. So I think Mr. Tabella will be able to give some more insight on that.
Very well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Solomon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill, which I introduced last year, working with Defenders of Animals, it would protect dogs in extreme temperatures. So it would prohibit keeping dogs outside in extreme temperatures. And what it utilizes is the Tufts safety scale, the weather scale. And the good thing about the Tufts weather scale is it takes into account the type of dog breed, the size of the dog, and whether water is available or whether shelter is available. So, it really accounts for different things, and, whether it's too hot out or too cold out, we need to protect these dogs because, they don't have a voice of their own, and we need to be their voice. And this bill actually passed out of this committee last year, passed the House floor, was sent over to the Senate, passed the Senate committee, but unfortunately, due to the last day of session, during that last shuffle. So, hopefully we pass it again this year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions for these representatives? Thank you very much. The next witness is, let's see, Elizabeth, is it Suaver, of Rhode Island Veterinary Medicine Association? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Elizabeth Seaver on behalf of Seaver, yeah. It's misspelled. Okay. It's fine. The U is silent. I'm actually signed up to speak on 7062, which was not just described by one of the sponsors.
Okay, yeah.
because I don't see Representative Serpa here. But that bill, what it would do is it would remove veterinarians their ability to confine animals if medically necessary. Obviously, if you've ever been to a veterinary hospital, you understand that animals are kept sometimes overnight, and veterinarians need to have a way to confine those animals for their safety vis-a-vis other animals that are in the hospital, but also for their own medical necessary treatment. For example, if an animal is coming out of anesthesia, it's just had a surgery, there's reasons why you would want to keep that animal in a confined space so they do not hurt themselves or further exacerbate their medical conditions. So we're concerned with the bill as drafted. We've had discussions with Representative Serpa about it, and we believe that she understands our concerns. I've also provided written testimony to the committee giving an example of why we would need the exemption to this rule to allow us to confine animals in veterinary hospitals. I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ann Corvin, Warwick Animal Shelter. And thank you for your letter as well. Ms. Corvin, please proceed. Button up. Push the button up.
Okay, it's on. Thank you. I'm here to speak on, well, I'm in opposition of some of the bills and for some of the bills. In reference to Rep. Fillella's bill on the euthanasia and animal shelters, I have several concerns about this bill. I work at a shelter that we do not have a high euthanasia rate, and we have a high adoption rate. My concern with this bill is not only potentially placing aggressive animals, particularly dogs, into a foster situation that could put the people at risk, but equally as important is my concern with having to send a dog to a shelter that's potentially providing less enrichment and lesser conditions, if you will, than what we're providing at the Warwick Animal Shelter. And every shelter operates differently, and not every shelter has the capability to provide the same conditions for these animals. So if we have an animal that is deteriorating in our shelter, in spite of everything that we're doing, there are other shelters that they may do better at. However, there are shelters that they will fare worse at and decline further, in which case I would consider those conditions to be considered inhumane. I feel that I don't know what prompted this bill to be put forward. I don't know if there are any shelters now that are arbitrarily euthanizing simply because of space or because of the time frame that the dogs or cats have been in the shelter. This would have been very helpful 20 years ago, and that was a common practice. And I worked under those conditions, and I know that that kind of stuff was happening. But now in 2016, I don't know that they are. And if they are happening in certain towns, then I would say shame on them, and perhaps that should be addressed at a more municipal level rather than statewide, because I feel if this bill passes, then it might help some animals, but it will also hurt other animals. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
And we have your written testimony.
Oh, okay.
And that's been distributed to the committee.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Corvin. Are there any questions for Ms. Corvin? Thank you very much.
Should I speak on the other two, or?
Yeah,
I come
if
back
you have a brief statement. No, on the other two. Why don't you give a brief statement on the other two, so we'll try to make it one trip.
Okay. I am in favor of Representative Solomon's bill. We have actually implemented an ordinance in Warwick using the tax scale in 2009, which has worked great for animal control, and I hope that it does pass at the state level. I think it will be very helpful.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Corvin? Thank you very much. At this time, I would ask the clerk to please take the roll. Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I am going to make a motion to hold all of the bills on our agenda for further study, and I would like to explain that to you, what it does. What this motion does is keeps all of these bills alive within the confines of our committee. The purpose of this motion is so that when we hear your testimony, we know, due to some of the written comments that have been submitted already, some of you are going to offer amendments and some different language for some of these bills and suggestions. By holding them for future study, it allows us to take your recommendations and amend the legislation that we're hearing. And I want to make this very clear, because sometimes people will make comments regarding this procedure and misrepresent it. So you know exactly what we're doing when we take this vote to hold for further study. It is to keep the bill alive and enable us to amend it within the confines of the committee. So at this time, I'm going to make a motion to hold House Bill 7645, 7646, 7061, 7062, 7083, and 7132, as well as 7258 for further study. I will make that motion. Second by Representative Azanaro. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Those bills will be held for further study. At this time, I would like to ask Scott, is it, it's the right, Marshall?
Rhode Island DEM.
Rhode Island DEM.
Marshall?
Is it Marshall?
Yeah.
Yeah, doctor's writing. Welcome, Mr. Marshall. Doctor's writing. It's like I used to tell my students I was going to be a doctor, but didn't have the patience. So you're very welcome. Yeah, thank you, thank you,
Chairman,
Representative Price. Please proceed.
Okay, so is this on? So I'm the state veterinarian at DEM.
Push it up.
Okay, I'm the state veterinarian with DEM, and that's probably why you couldn't read my writing. I'm sorry about that. So I'm here to testify. Is it okay if I testify on 7083, 7061?
Whatever your pleasure is, Doctor.
Okay, we'll handle those three at the same time. The department has some serious concerns with 7083. We also submitted written testimony that's going to go into a lot more detail than my oral testimony. I'll just hit on some of the high points here. We feel that the provisions of this bill are largely impractical, will cause harm to animals, and will jeopardize public health. They also have the tendency to put undue financial burden on cities and towns and privately funded shelters. The provisions as addressed in the proposed 419-22-2 are impractical and will render municipal animal control facilities unable to fulfill one of their core missions, which is public health. Basically requiring every pound or shelter to operate at full capacity is not in the interest of public health. Shelters and pounds have to have available cage space to quarantine animals that might be held for rabies. So having that, not having that capacity will jeopardize public health. There's no provision in the proposal that would allow for the euthanasia of animals that are sick, injured, infirmed. We think this would be on one level cruel, on another level very irresponsible. Animals that are very aggressive, keeping them in a shelter situation would expose the shelter staff to potential harm. Animals that are sick, animals that are debilitated, have no chance of recovery, would be left to languish and couldn't be euthanized to end their suffering. So I think that needs to be addressed. There would be a significant impact on municipal pounds and private animal shelters who would just be warehousing these animals. We know that animals that are kept in pound and shelter situations for exceedingly long periods of time develop abnormal stereotypic behaviors. That's certainly not in their interest. And the department also feels that this legislation is largely unnecessary. In fact, in 2014, we tasked a student from Tufts University School of Veterinary Medicine to look into the euthanasia rates in all the cities and towns. They studied data for 2013, and they determined that statewide only 2 dogs were euthanized in the state for the purpose of creating space. Those 2 dogs were in the same municipality, and I agree with Officer Corvin that, this is or Director Corvin, this is something that would be better dealt with on a municipal one-by-one situation than making a statewide law. Finally, the department is right now in the steps finalizing an online reporting system where all of the intakes and dispositions of the animals that come into the pounds and shelter systems in the state will be available online so that people can look into an individual municipality, see how many animals were taken in, see how many were adopted, see how many were euthanized, and see the purposes for which they were euthanized. So I think bringing that level of transparency will, as Ann Corvin said, cause people to self-police. They'll be able to be held more accountable. Just in closing, that similar bills were introduced in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and the department had the same concerns. It seems like, this bill has not changed in those years. Thank you very much. 7061 and 7062 basically address the same chapter Rhode Island law for 1342. The department feels very strongly that 7061 is a good bill.
Okay.
Okay. It allows the conditions that an animal is to be kept in to be evaluated on a scientific, objective basis versus, kind of making these piecemeal exceptions that exist in 7062. And again, this is, is illustrated in a lot more detail in our letter to you all. And I think I can close there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Marshall? Thank you very much for your testimony, Dr. Marshall.
Welcome.
Joe Wazica, Dennis Tabella, and Joanne Rongo. And if during your testimony, if you could please try not to repeat what's already been stated. And we'll start with Mr. Wazica. Welcome, sir, from the Rhode Island SPCA.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Joe Wazica. I'm the Animal Cruelty Officer from the Rhode Island SPCA, and I'm here to represent the Society tonight in my views. I'd first like to address 7061, and again, I'll do my best not to be redundant. We are in support of this bill. The issue of shelter has been an issue of contention for the 6.5 years that I've been here. There's a very broad definition of shelter under Rhode Island General Law. The only place you will find it now is in Rhode Island General Law 4-1-2, and it states that shelter is defined as any house or structure that will provide an animal with sufficient protection from the inclement elements for the health and well-being of the animal. It's a very broad definition. It doesn't take into account the particular breed of the animal. As you know, a Siberian Husky may do very well in the winter, whereas a boxer or another dog without a heavy fur coat would not. I get a number of calls every year from animal control officers wanting to have some discussion in regards to shelter, posing a scenario. I have this dog that's outside. Do you think it's too cold? Do you think it's too hot? The tax scale would simplify this. And as stated, it quantifies temperature, and it also takes into account conditions such as breed, specific weather conditions, and the condition of the animal. So it would certainly make my job, and I believe the job of the animal control officers, much easier. So we are in support of this bill. In regards to 7062, we can appreciate the concept of what this bill is trying to address. I can tell you that the Rhode Island SPCA has a very good working relationship with a number of shelters in the state where we have taken animals on transfer, whether it's been due to space or just a change in environment. So I do like the concept of trying to exhaust whatever resources are available before euthanizing an animal. Our concerns with this are, and they were already addressed, are medical and behavioral. So I think it would be irresponsible to, put an animal out into the general public that hasn't been behaviorally assessed or medically assessed. And then in regards to 7083, 7083 was the one I just addressed regarding behavioral and medical. 7062, We would oppose this bill again as written. As written, it would put ourselves and every other municipal pound or shelter in the state in violation, as we all confine our dogs for over 14 hours a day. I understand it may not be ideal, but it's the reality of the situation. So as this bill is written, we would oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Any questions for Mr. Wadzika? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Amore. And
Thank you. The situation we both visited earlier this year, without using any names, would 7061 address that issue?
If you just give me 1 second to look at the way the statute is read.
Just to inform the members,
Sure.
I visited a kennel where owner was raising hunting dogs, and we both visited together.
Correct.
So the question I'm asking is how would this apply to that situation, and would that allow that kennel to remain operational?
Sure. Well, as I read the bill 7061, it says keep any dog outside, either tethered, pen, cage, fence, or otherwise confined without access to an outdoor housing facility. So I think that would be an issue in applying the tax scale to that situation, because the dogs do have access to an outdoor housing facility. So I don't see that this bill, if it becomes law, would apply under those conditions.
Okay, and that's how I read it too, but just to get your opinion. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
thank you. And yes, Representative Handy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on the, you had said it would make all of you guys would all be out of compliance because of the 14-hour piece. Can you give me more context for what you were saying along the way?
Sure.
I may have missed something, but
Absolutely, and if you just give me a minute, I'd like to reference the bill.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
So on page 2, lines 5 and 6, number 3, the way it's currently written, it says to a training facility, grooming facility, commercial boarding kennel, pet shop licensed in accordance with 419, animal shelter, municipal pound, or veterinary facility. So if this bill passed as written, it would no longer exempt the SPCA as an animal shelter or any municipal pound from confining their animals for more than 14 hours a day. And again, as unfortunate as it may be by nature of what we do, the animals are there 24/7. Yes, we try to get them out as much as we can, but I would certainly say they're in their kennels for more than 14 hours a day. So that is an issue. And there is also one other point I'd like to bring up in regards to that. It also is removing the exemption that would allow animal control officers to exempt people. I think it's pretty important to keep that part in there because, as an animal control officer, assuming that they are trained professionals, there are certain circumstances that may arise where it would be okay to keep an animal outside confined for more than the 14 hours. We had a recent incident in the city of Central Falls. The gentleman had a dog. It was a bear Akita, very heavy coated dog that would do just fine in the cold temperatures, assuming that he had a proper shelter for the dog. And it was presented that the dog was going to be taken from him. He was going to be charged with animal cruelty. And under those circumstances, he would tell us, well, the dog sits at the door and he cries because he wants to be outside. 70 degrees inside for us may be very comfortable, but for a dog like that, he would more likely rather be outside. So I think under certain circumstances, it's important to allow the animal control officers to use their discretion in allowing certain people to be exempt from these provisions. And sometimes it can mean whether or not an individual is able to keep their dog or not. Well, now I have to give my dog away because I have to bring it in the house for a certain number of hours a day. So that, in addition to the other issue I mentioned, we would oppose the bill as it's written.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Wadzika? Thank you very much for your testimony, Mr. Wadzika. Before we continue, could the record please reflect that Representative McLaughlin, Representative Lancia, Representative Ackerman would like to be recorded in the affirmative on the vote to hold for further study? And I don't think I missed anyone. And next we have Ms. Rongo. Welcome. Please proceed. And I also wore my favorite cat tie that, it's always a pleasure to have, everyone together. And I know you had a little rally today at the State House, so it coordinated nicely with that. And that's our pleasure to accommodate you. So welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you very much. I'm here to support four of the bills, oppose 2 of them, and give written testimony on 1. So what I would like to do is say that 7061, Mr. Solomon's bill, Volunteer Services for Animals, supports this bill. We think it's a good bill. 7062, Representative Serper, we believe that the tethering and confinement of certain dogs should be given attention to, and we think that's a good bill. We hope that maybe it can be amended to satisfy the concerns of the Rhode Island SPCA. 7083, shelters meeting certain conditions. Networking is good. Opening the doors and letting there be an exchange of information and knowledge going from one shelter to the other can't hurt. It will also give the opportunity to bring the ACOs closer together, exchange information, and it will give the animals a second or third chance. So we support 7258. I think those are the only 3 bills that
Okay,
you're
that's correct.
considering
Yep.
right now.
Yep. Are there any questions for Ms. Rongo? Thank you very much for your testimony. And next we have Dennis Stabella, who is a very dedicated advocate. Welcome, Dennis. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and members of the HEW committee. Representative Falevo's bill, the original wording came out of the state of Delaware. In other words, it's already happening someplace. And there is a sub-A, and unfortunately, because of the system, the way it's set up, you couldn't introduce a sub-A until there was a hearing. So there are people in this room that don't know what's in that sub-A, I
Right.
imagine.
Mr. Tabella, do we have a copy of the sub-A? Oh, do you have a copy of the sub-A?
Wording of it, but I can leave this with the secretary.
Yeah, if you could leave that with the clerk, that'd be great. Thank you.
I think it's important that people know that you could, in the sub-A, you could euthanize an animal if a veterinarian states that the animal needs to be euthanized for humane reasons or for medical reasons. So that would be in the sub-A. It also would cover dogs that are aggressive and dangerous. If the dog is determined, for an example, to be vicious within accordance with Title 4, Chapter 413-1, in other words, the vicious dog panel, then the dog or cat could be euthanized, or in this case it would be a dog. If the animal control officer or director of the shelter is certified by a National Animal Care and Control Association, he or she may make that determination. And I'll leave the information with you, but I wanted to clear up something. I personally sent through the public access law in Rhode Island, information on euthanization of dogs and cats in Rhode Island for the last 5 years. Don't let anybody come up here and tell you only a few animals were put to sleep. That's absolutely untrue. And I will leave that. I'll get that information to the secretary so that every member of this committee has that. There have been hundreds of animals put to sleep in the last 5 years in Rhode Island. Not all of those dogs were vicious. Not all of those cats were sick or injured. Yes, somebody came up and made a statement that it's not as bad as it used to be. That's true. It's not. But it's still a problem. And Rhode Island is the smallest state in the union. We can be a no-kill state, and we can certainly get close to it. Last night they interviewed the new director of the Providence Shelter, Channel 10, and she was talking about the same thing. You didn't hear that 10 years ago from Providence Animal Shelter. She's trying to get as close to running a no-kill shelter as possible in Providence, where they've got more dogs and cats to deal with than most shelters do. So this is where we should be headed. This is a good bill. I think the sub-A is going to clear up a lot of concerns that some shelters have, but here's an interesting fact. You have some shelters and some people that are fighting exchanging animals. It's already going on. Providence has sent animals to other shelters. Warwick has. West Warwick has. They either have taken animals from other places or they've sent them to other places. It's already going on. Is it going on in all 30-plus communities? No. But it would be good if it was. We wouldn't have to be putting down too many animals if that were the case. Here's the interesting fact. You have shelters and groups in this state that are bringing dogs into the state 1,000 miles away, but they don't want to take a dog that's two miles away, but they'll take them 1,000 miles away. Does that make any sense? If we got too many dogs in the state as it is, trust me, sooner or later this is going to blow up. We got to put an end to all these dogs coming in here because we're never going to get to the point where we're no-kill. And you have dogs now that have been at shelters for months and months, some over a year. And guess what happens? It's very interesting. I've seen this happen in East Providence before. You put that same dog in another shelter and all of a sudden it gets adopted. It happens all the time in other states. We should be doing, all these shelters should be working together. In the new, the sub-A, it specifically states that if you're going to turn an animal over to another shelter or an organization, it has to be acceptable to you. So nobody's forcing any shelter to turn over a dog or a cat to anybody in particular. If you go on Pet Finder, you're going to find over 100 shelters or organizations all listed under Rhode Island. They got all kinds of choices where to go. Nobody's forcing anybody to turn over a cat or dog to any particular organization or any particular shelter. So I think it's a good bill. Defenders of Animals, of course, supports this bill. The wording, the original wording is already in the state of Delaware. It can work here, and it can work very well. And it's a small state. We should be doing it.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions from the representatives?
Want my testimony on the other two bills?
You got a question? You want to wait? Well, now.
I can ask him now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rep. Bennett has a question.
Do you feel all the shelters are equal? I know we're going to say no, but I mean, what if you've got a good shelter? Everybody feels it's a good shelter, and you have to take that dog and transfer him to another shelter that's not that nice.
Well, Representative Bennett, nobody's forcing any shelter in this bill to put that dog in a particular shelter, so you get your choice. It doesn't even have to be a shelter. It could be an incorporated Rhode Island organization.
I understand that.
Your choices. So to answer your first question, are all shelters equal? No. Are there better shelters than some? Absolutely. I have my preference. I walk dogs at the West Warwick Animal Shelter. That's where I volunteered. That's my preference. If I had a dog, that's where I would put the dog. But I've seen how they operate for the last 7 or 8 years. I've been there. But that's my preference. The only other shelter that we actually operated under contract with the city of East Providence was East Providence, and that was some years ago. And East Providence is one of the better shelters. So if I had to rank all the shelters, I could do that. However, it depends on the circumstances, it depends on the dogs, it depends on the volunteers, who the animal control officers are they getting good support from dog trainers and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of factors. It's not a quick and easy answer.
Well, that's my concern, is if you got a shelter that takes care of their dogs, takes them for walks, talks to them, and then you got a shelter that just warehouses them. I could see where you'd have a conflict from the person who takes care of their dogs better than one, sending it to the shelter. I mean, I love dogs and I have dogs.
No wording in this bill would force anybody.
Is that in the sub-A or this bill here?
Oh, it's in the original bill. It doesn't say you have to turn over your dog or cat to anyone. It's only you put it out there. If nobody wants it, then you do what you got to do.
I understand that part. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, proceed on the other two bills, please.
On H7061, Representative Solomon's bill, as I think was already mentioned, there are cities that already actually have this in place. East Providence is one of them. Warwick is one. Cranston is one. Providence is one. So this wording is actually already in place. And I think this is an excellent bill, but it would be really good if every city and town followed this. And it makes the animal control officer's job easier. And when you go to court and you have to show evidence, this is an excellent tool to use, the Tufts piece. The Massachusetts SPCA already tested this some years ago. It works. It works very well. And East Providence, Warwick, as Ian Corbin from Warwick expressed your opinion on this, this works. Works in Warwick, works in East Providence, works in Providence, in Cranston, and Johnston also has it. So we're in favor of this bill, absolutely. And as far as Representative Surfa's bill, 7062, the idea behind this was to make sure that all dogs were protected. And if someone's got some other wording that could do that, I think they should submit it to this committee, if there's better wording for this. But some years ago when the original bill was introduced to protect dogs in bad weather, for some reason this pieces got taken out of it. Now, to me, there's no difference between a hunting dog and a collie or any other dog. They all need to be protected. There are no exceptions for animals left in vehicles during extreme temperatures, the bill that passed just a couple of years ago. There's no exceptions. We don't say you can have a beagle or a hunting or a Labrador, a hunting dog in a car in extreme weather and you can't do anything about it. There's no exceptions there. All dogs are protected under that bill, under that law. There are no exceptions in the Rhode Island law that says you can't destroy an animal in a gas chamber. We got rid of that years ago. But it didn't say, oh, but you can destroy hunting dogs in a gas chamber. It didn't say that. There were no exceptions. There were no exceptions in the vicious dog panel process. If any dog attacks another dog or attacks a person and there's a vicious dog panel, we don't make exceptions for hunting dogs. You can go through Rhode Island's laws, Chapter 4, all through that. There are no exceptions, except for here. We don't protect hunting dogs like we do other dogs. And this is all we're trying to do. And if somebody's got better wording for this, we're wide open for listening to that. So we're just saying, don't leave these dogs unprotected. So we're in favor of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes. Question.
Yes.
Yes.
I've got a question. You gentlemen seem to be the professionals, on dogs. The SPCA officer and lady in the middle. I want to know, with all the, dog kennels that we have in the state, including the SPCA, okay, do you have adequate walkways or walking facilities for these dogs? Hey, anyone?
I'm familiar with a number of shelters, but the one I volunteer at is West Warwick Animal Shelter, which is connected to a park, which is there's also a bike path.
Okay.
And there's plenty of space to walk around, which I find very healthy. It's a healthy situation for dogs. So it's not in an industrial area. There's a lot of fresh air and a lot of space to walk a dog around.
How about you, sir?
I can speak on behalf of the SPCA in what I know of other facilities in the state. We do have outdoor exercise areas, fenced-in areas where dogs can go and run. The limitation on that is having the ability or having the personnel to do that. So we have a very good volunteer base. We have our employees, but our employees don't always have the time to socialize the dogs. They're cleaning, they're doing their other duties. We rely heavily on our volunteers to take our dogs for walks, get them out of the kennel. I can't speak for all other shelters, but I don't think every other shelter has the ability or a volunteer base that would allow them to get the dogs out on a regular basis.
The reason I say that, it's and I think it would be pursuant to have a standardized system, throughout the state and reference, because all dogs have personalities, and I've had dogs all my life. I have right now an Italian Mastiff. She's 5 months old. She weighs 75 pounds. She's big and she's beautiful, but that dog loves to be walked. If she's in the house, she's a house dog, but she wants to go for a walk at least once or twice a day. And
thank you, Rep.
Yeah, it's just their personality.
I know, but you're getting off subject here, please.
Yeah, well, the dogs have different personalities.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions for these three witnesses? Thank you very much for your testimony. Next three witnesses are Jacqueline Ruggieri, Kathy McElroy, and Christy Smith. Yeah, just two more after that. Who we missing?
I'm Christy Smith. Did we lose everybody else?
Kathy McElroy, not here? Oh, okay. Well, you can speak if you wish. And Jacqueline Ruggieri, not here? How about Robin Hall? Could you come up? No. Okay. Christy, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Christy Smith. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having this Animal Day here at the State House. I am the Executive Director at the Potter League for Animals. We serve Newport County. And I am here to testify for and against. I fully support, and will keep it short, H7061, using the Tufts Animal Care and Condition Weather Safety Scale. It works. It's well respected. It's science. It's very helpful. I fully support that bill. H7062, I understand the concept of removing animals, especially dogs, living permanently on tethers of 6 feet or 10 feet in the backyard. But I do think that there needs to be some consideration, such as the RIVMA and the SPCA has mentioned. There are situations where dogs are in kennels, in our shelters, in our veterinary hospitals. They do get out, they do get walked. We have fabulous volunteers, and it makes a big difference. So the intent is okay, but it needs some work. I will reserve most of my comments for H7083. And this bill is a small piece of something called the Companion Animal Protection Act. It was one small section has been lifted out of about a 20-page bill and dropped here. It is also a bill that the Companion Animal Protection Act originates from the no-kill movement. And I am not here to ask you questions, but I will ask you to think for a minute, just consider yourself how you define no-kill. What does that mean to you? It's not a class, you don't have to answer. In the professional animal welfare world, no kill does not mean animals are never euthanized. The laws that started most of this are from California from 35 years ago. And the language talks about, a lot of specifics when animals are euthanized. No does not mean no. It's a sound bite that sounds good but is not accurate. In today's world, shelters that are placing more than 90% or more of their animals are considered no-kill shelters. There's still 10% of the animals that are euthanized. The Potter League for Animals has over 90% placement for all of our animals. I could stand here and say we are a no-kill shelter, and I could stand here and say there are many other shelters in Rhode Island that could say the same thing. We refuse to use that language because it is inflammatory and confusing. This bill does nothing for us, in my mind. I have testified against this bill, not last year because I was out of the state, but 5 other times. And every single time it keeps coming back, and every single time I say that professional animal welfare community does not want this bill. I will tell you that this bill flies in the face of the Association of Shelter Veterinarians, who say you cannot overfill your shelters. You cannot take up every single cage and potential living environment with animals. You are then warehousing. You're exposing all of your animals to disease and illness. It is not helpful. We do not want to warehouse animals. If I could make this bill go away and never come back for a 6th or 7th or 8th or 10th time, I would happily endorse that. Maybe I can introduce that bill. I have been doing this for 35 years in Rhode Island. I'm retiring at the end of this year. I hope this bill disappears forever. It is not what we need. And in most cases, the shelters in this state are working together, moving animals around, placing animals, and we're all trying to do the same thing. This bill will not help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Question.
It's
Rep. McLaughlin.
Question. Yes. Yes, ma'am. You had mentioned, you spoke on, animals that are put to sleep.
Yeah.
What are the stats?
What are the stats?
Or what are the stats? What are the numbers? And I'd like to look at also veterinary clinics.
I would have no idea what's euthanized in veterinary clinics. Veterinarians do not euthanize a lot of animals unless there's health issues.
Are there any numbers on that?
I wouldn't have any idea who tracks it in the state, and I don't think they're required to submit those numbers.
That would be something to look at in the future.
In the shelter world, at the Potter League for Animals, if we euthanize 8% of the animals a year, it will be serious behavior issues, serious health issues. They are animals that I will not want living next to me, and you might not want them living next to you. They are not all declared vicious. They are not all recoverable from their health issues, no matter how much money you put in them, unless you are doing kidney transplants, which I don't think anyone in the state is doing kidney transplants for their dogs and cats. So within reason, shelters such as the Potter League and others are putting a lot of money, a lot of staff time, a lot of effort into behavior programs, into medicine to keep animals healthier, and that's why our euthanasia rate is so low. And sharing animals and advice and help with other larger and smaller organizations.
Thank you. Any other questions for this witness? Thank you. Yes, next. It's got to be up. There you go.
That I agree with Bill 7061. I agree with Bill 7062. I agree with Bill 7083. And I agree with Bill 7258. I disagree with Bills 7645. I disagree with 7646. And I disagree with 7132. Thank you, members and chairman of the committee, for hearing me.
Thank you very much. So I won't call you on the next 3 bills, because you went with 6 of them instead of just the 3.
One clean sweep.
I think you were non-speaking on these. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you for coming up and being so
Thank you for hearing.
brief. Yes.
Hello. I'm a member of Defenders of Animals, and I'm not here to speak. I just want to say that I am for Bill 7061, 7062, 7083, and 7258. Do you want to hear the other ones since I'm here? And I am against Bill 7645, 7646, and 7132.
Okay.
And can I just say, as a state, why can't all the animal shelters have a standard of care that everyone's on the same page?
Point exactly.
There is?
I'm sorry, there are state regulations about how shelters should be caring for animals.
Because some are.
Some have better funding than others, and municipal governments have a hard time funding their municipal facilities.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you. Appreciate you listening.
Kim Kashi? Kashi, is that correct? Defender of Animals.
Have anything additional to add to what Dennis Tabella had said, so I'd just like to be recorded in favor of 7083, the sub-A that he mentioned, and also in favor of 7061 and 7062 with the sub-A that addresses the concerns. That's it.
Thank you very much, Kim. Any questions? Thank you. That concludes the hearing on bills 7061, 7062, 7083. I think I jumped ahead of one here. House Bill 7132 by our whip, Edwards. Please come forward.
This is a bill I introduced last year. If you can look at the bill, it's very, very short and abbreviated. And unfortunately, that led to its demise last year. I introduced this bill on behalf of the town of Tiverton and another group, Paws Watch. We have a very big feral cat problem in the town, and we have this group wants to go out and capture these feral cats, mark them, spay them, give them the medical treatment they need, and then re-release them. And they cannot do that as the law is currently written. They also met last year with Dr. Marshall, and they suggested some sub-A language. I sent a copy of that suggested language to Chairman McNamara, and I also just sent a copy to Dr. Marshall. He is going to tweak what he needs to have, what he thinks would make the bill a little more palatable. But that language really briefly says that this section would take out the wording as it is right now and the change. It would add, this section shall not apply to any humane animal welfare group that is engaged in the activity of trapping feral cats for the purpose of spaying or neutering these cats, provided A, the cats will be released at the same location where they are originally trapped, and B, the cats have been spayed or neutered by a licensed veterinarian vaccinated for rabies and feline distemper, and identified with the left ear tip. I go to a liquor store in town, nice liquor store in district, and they're on the edge of the woods in Tiverton. They have one of the largest cats I have ever seen, and this is a feral cat that they inherited, and it has its left ear clipped. It is friendly, and I'm not a cat person, but this cat, every time I go there, this cat gets up on the counter and everyone loves this cat and pets them. So I think this is a good way for us as a town to be able to capture these cats, do what they need medically, spay them, neuter them, and then release them back so we don't have a growing population of feral cats. I have forwarded the language, as I said, to Dr. Marshall. I will work with him and the state to see if there's any additional language that needs to be added. And I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Edwards. Any questions for the sponsor of the bill? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, Chairman.
first three witnesses are going to be Joe Wazika, E.J. Finocchio, and Scott Marshall. Yeah, I did. I said that on the other ones. Yeah. All right, got it. Proceed.
Thank you, sir. Sorry. I think the director signed me up for this bill, and I wasn't necessarily prepared to testify. However, with the sub bill that was mentioned, I can say that I do like the language very much. I think we had some issues with the way the bill was currently written, so we would be interested in seeing the sub bill and maybe having further testimony at that time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marshall.
On behalf of DEM, I think the Representative Edwards really summed up our concerns with the bill, that it was overly broad for all licensed releasing agencies to be exempt from the cruel act of releasing animals. I would be happy to take a look at the sub-A language and work with the rep and work with the drivers of the bill to settle on language we can agree on. But we oppose the bill as it's currently written.
This sheet I have is for three bills, really: 7132, 7646, and 7258. If you would like to comment on those three, I believe. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, you better talk about it first. I'm sorry. I'm just getting ahead of myself because we got three bills on the sheet here, and everybody signed up for it. But I've got three sponsors to go. So at this time, we'll call on Representative Ackerman to discuss her bill number 7258. I don't see him.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, House Bill 7258, which this committee passed unanimously last year as part of an effort undertaken with the RISPCA to protect animals that are being hoarded in dangerous living conditions. This bill is the next step in a process that the General Assembly has undertaken with the RISPCA and other animal rights groups that has taken our state from 22 in terms of safety for animals to the 9th safest place in the country. In a nutshell, the bill adds a definition of hoarding to our animal cruelty statute and adds hoarding as a justification for a charge of animal cruelty. Hawaii and Illinois have already passed this legislation. It's my hope that this bill will save the lives of many animals. I also want to bring to your attention that I will be requesting a sub-A to this as well, because it's come to my attention that we need to add some language which will state that convicted animal hoarders be sentenced to mandatory psychological evaluation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for the sponsor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is Representative Shikachi here for Bill 7646? Okay, if he does come in later, we'll have him testify on that. But in the meantime, we've heard testimony now on bills number 7132 from Representative Edwards and House Bill 7258, Representative Ackerman. And again, Joe Wazika, would you like to come forward, and Scott Marshall to talk on the 7258 bill? And I don't see, E.J. Finocchio.
Oh, sir, yeah, I believe he had to step out. He's the director of the SPCA, so I'll be speaking on behalf of the society.
Thank you. Proceed.
Okay. I have a visual aid, and I feel like I should apologize in advance before I open it up. It is a bit graphic, but I do think it's important that you see these photos. So. Should I put it up on the table? Maybe in the middle? I prepared a written statement. Normally I like to have speaking points, but this is a pretty complex issue. It just seemed a little more appropriate to organize it in a written statement. In 2015, the Rhode Island SPCA took in over 200 cats on hoarding investigations alone, and this number has been relatively consistent for the past 7 years of my employment at the SPCA. We recognize that hoarding is a mental illness and one with a high rate of reoffense. We also recognize that criminal prosecution is not always warranted under all circumstances. However, our argument is based on the fact that these offenders are in need of mental health counseling, and by what other means can this be mandated other than through the court system? By adding hoarding as a criminal offense, it not only brings attention to the negative impact on both the animals and the human, but provides an efficient manner to remove and care for the animals and the human inhabitants. Every hoarding situation we have encountered, we have found the conditions inside of the residence to be harmful and unsafe for both animal and human occupancy. The numbers in these cases have reached upwards of 100 cats in a single residence. The problem that then arises is finding placement for all of these cats, which is often impossible. We're faced with the unfortunate fact that some may have to be euthanized simply because we have no placement for them. Our normal protocol is to contact every organization in the state asking for assistance in placement, and even then there is often little available space. There are also a number of other logistical problems that arise and a number of other agencies that must become involved. Elderly affairs, EMS and fire department, building officials, and local police. As you can see, hoarding presents a very complex set of circumstances, and we believe that we would be negligent in our duties if we did not make an effort to address the situation.
Thank you very much for that. Questions? Yes. Representative McLaughlin, question.
Yes. In reference to this bill, I'm looking at line 6 through 11. In reference to the bill itself, how do you define hoarding? When I say that, I don't see a number of animals that the SPCA would consider excessive, or are you going by municipality, regulations? They actually have ordinances in place where a number of livestock, animals. How do you define that?
Sure. Well, on page 2, lines 6 through 11, it does provide a definition of hoarding, and you'll see in that definition it does not mention numbers.
Yeah.
Because hoarding isn't about numbers, and I think that's what people get confused about. There are what we categorize as collectors versus hoarders. Collectors are people that may accumulate a large number of animals, but provide for them, provide food, water, shelter, veterinary care. Hoarding is more about the conditions of the animals and their health and well-being. It's not about numbers. You can have 6 cats that you put in a 2x2 closet and it's full of feces and urine and cluttered. That would be considered hoarding. You can have 15 cats or 20 cats that have clean litter boxes, food, water, shelter, and it wouldn't be categorized as hoarding. So hoarding is not about numbers. It's more about the conditions provided for the animals. Usually numbers come along with that, but that's not always the case.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes. Thank you, Representative Andy.
And again, because I think you probably, what is the penalty for the animal cruelty stuff under this equation? It's not here. So I can go back and find it in the laws, but I was just having trouble finding that.
Sure. It states on page 2, I believe it's line 23 and 24, shall be punished for each offense in the manner according to 412. And that is the misdemeanor statute. It's up to 11 months in jail and $50 to a $500 fine. And I also want to make it clear that we have a lot of discretion when it comes to penalties and enforcement of all of the statutes. We're not necessarily looking to send someone to jail or even impose fines upon them. But what's clear is the need for some type of mental health intervention. And there's no way to obligate that unless you get them involved in the court system. So it's unfortunate that it has to be that way, but the number of reoffenders with these cases is so high, unless you hold them accountable, it's just going to keep happening.
Thank you. I think we could probably put the thing down. Everyone's seen that, I believe. It can be shown to the people in the audience if they'd like to take a peek at that. But it's pretty graphic, so maybe they would rather not. Mr. Marshall.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I can say that...
Is the button up on that mic?
That is, I'm sorry. I can attest to everything that Agent Wazika has stated about hoarding, being a serious issue. We have investigated hoarding cases and prosecuted hoarding cases in conjunction with each other. The only concern the department has, and we'd be very interested in seeing what the sub-A language is that this act may be quite unnecessary because the act of hoarding addresses adequate living conditions for multiple animals. We already have laws that address adequate living conditions for a single animal. So what's the difference if it's addressed for one animal or 50 animals? Again, we'd be very interested to see what the sub-A language has to say, but we really don't see this as advancing the current situation from where it is.
Thank you. Any questions for this? Yes, Representative Lancia.
Thank you. Just curious, just a quick question. You talk about collectors versus hoarders. What kind of numbers are we talking about? I mean, how much of a problem is this? I mean, I'd be curious.
I'm sorry, how much of a problem is hoarding?
Well, I mean, you say collectors versus hoarding.
Numbers.
Is that something that, that is a...
Usually when we see a large number of animals, it's a hoarding situation. It's not...
Numbers of people that are, say, collectors versus hoarders. Is that...
I can only speak on behalf of what we see every year. Now, granted, the Rhode Island SPCA is not necessarily involved in every criminal investigation in the state of Rhode Island. Most hoarding cases we are, because municipalities, including ourselves, are not equipped to handle that large number of cats at one time. So normally we rely on each other. I would say a dozen cases a year of hoarding, which again may not seem like a lot over the period of a year, but when you're dealing with such a large number at one time, it makes it very logistically difficult to address.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? Thank you very much for your testimony, gentlemen. Next, three witnesses, Ann Corin on 7258, Dennis Tabella, 7132, 7258, and I'll hold off on the 7646 for now. And the third one, Jacqueline Ruggieri, not speaking. And who is, let's see, against 7132, against 7646, and is for the 7258, but not speaking. Kathy McElroy, Defenders of Animals, against 7132, against 7646, and for 7258, but not speaking. Rita Bina, Defenders of Animals, 7132, against 7646, against 7258. I can't tell, but it's not speaking. I'm trying to get to someone that wants to come up and talk. Joanne Rongo, USA 7132. Speaking. Okay. Boom, boom, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. On my left, on the right.
Thank you. I am supportive of 7258, and I won't reiterate what Joe had to say, but I agree with everything he said, and these people are very often repeat offenders, and unfortunately, I think we need to have some consequences and counseling for these individuals, or they will continue the same behavior.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Okay. Joanne.
hoarding is a terrible situation. It's always going to be there to deal with, unfortunately, and if this bill will help decrease the problem in any way, we should try it for the good of the animals and for the good of the person who's involved in the hoarding.
Thank you very much. Dennis.
Yes, thank you. Defenders of Animals is in favor of the bill, the sub-A. And I think it's crucial that that the sub-A contain, and I'm quote, convicted animal hoarders be sentenced to mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment. They are repeaters, and we've had situations in Situate, Warwick, Providence, Pawtucket, and over the years. And one thing we know about pet hoarders is once they're caught, they sometimes move. They'll move to another city, sometimes even move back. And it's important, we can't don't treat them as criminals and leave it at that. It's crucial that they get help, because otherwise they're going to repeat it, and you can take all their animals away and they'll just fill up their house again. So I think the sub-A is where we want to be, and we're in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for these witnesses?
Are we testifying on the other two bills too?
Let me look here, see what we've got. 7132.
Yes. On Bill H7132, as Representative Edwards pointed out, this was actually a Tiverton situation, and one of the council people on the town council in Tiverton, I think, had asked for the original bill to be introduced. And I think personally, based on what I know, there are feral cat situations all over the state, not just Tiverton. And I think it's important. I don't recall any organization being fined or arrested or whatever for doing trap, neuter release with feral cats. And I think it's important to know that there are individuals involved with trap, neuter release, not just organizations throughout the state. And Representative Diaz, we had a situation in the Elmwood section some years ago when I was the executive director at the Elmwood Community Center, where we had a colony of cats being taken care of. We ended up with those cats, and they turned out not to be feral. They were just strays. And as a matter of fact, one of the persons in the room tonight actually took one of the cats to Ocean State, the veterinary emergency clinic. And but my point is, feral cats are being taken care of by individuals, not just licensed releasing agencies. They're being taken care of throughout the state. But this particular bill really originated out of Tiverton because it was a concern in Tiverton. So I don't know. I'm thinking that this should have been an ordinance in Tiverton to take care of their problem out in Tiverton. I don't think we really need this statewide. But if we're going to do this bill, then I think the language change that Representative Edwards mentioned, I think, is good. But I think we need to make sure that the word feral is in this bill, because you don't want anybody, I don't care if they're licensed or not, you don't want anybody dumping off domestic cats in the woods. So I think it's important that language be tight and say feral cats. Thank you.
Any questions for these witnesses? Did anyone here want to speak on the 7646?
Yes.
Bill?
Go ahead, Julia.
Yes.
I would like to speak on 7132.
7132?
The bill as it was written was very important to our organization. I consolidated our thoughts. I gave a copy to the committee, but I would like the committee to hear what I have to say in person. It kind of sinks in more when you hear it than when you read it. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the HEW committee, my name is Joanne Rongo. I am a lifelong resident of the City of Providence and present chair of Volunteer Services for Animals, also known as VSA, established in 1979. I have been a rescuer and trapper of homeless and feral cats for more than 25 years. Webster's 7th dictionary defines limbo as a place of restraint or confinement. That is where I believe this bill, if it becomes law, will place the many small humane organizations and feral cat rescuers. We will either be intimidated by it and afraid to break the law, or not be aware of it and break the law unknowingly. Keeping us all informed of this law will not be a simple task. Some would say the present laws are not enforced by the relevant state agency because of lack of staffing. Why would we want to place more responsibility on these state agencies? What has happened to make this bill necessary? Many of us feel that this bill can and will be used to harass feral cat rescuers. The big Rhode Island humane organizations do not help with the feral cat problem. The animal control offices in the cities and towns either have no time or interest in this tedious and time-taking task. That is how and why it fell over the years to the cat lovers to take this action. We know that state government doesn't have the money, time, or staff to fix this problem. Therefore, why make it more difficult for citizens who are actively helping? TNR, trap, neuter release, has been occurring in this state for decades. It has done much good. I hope you will consider my testimony before you vote on this bill, which has serious ramifications for so many of us. Now, I heard, just to close, I heard that the bill is already in the process of being amended to include animal welfare groups. That would be VSA, my organization. But there are many, many cat lovers out there, unbeknown to us, who are trapping and sterilizing out of their own pockets and bringing the cats back. And as Dennis said, we need to, if we amend this bill, we need to fix it so that not only the humane organizations can trap safely, but the individual animal lovers out there can do the same with the same protection. Thank you very much for hearing my testimony.
Thank you very much for the testimony. If you have anything written, and if I missed anybody that has written testimony on any of the bills that we heard, we'd like to give them to the clerk.
I just wanted to comment, Mr. Vice Chairman, that we support 7258. I guess I already said that, didn't I? It's a good bill.
I think you did, but that's okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to comment on Bill 7646.
Proceed.
On line 13, it says that nothing contained herein and so on and so forth. In other words, if a city had a restriction on the number of cats that was more restrictive than 10 cats, they could do that. My question is, what about those cities and towns that have no restrictions on the number of cats? And if you look at 30-plus communities, most cities and towns do not have a restriction on the number of cats. Even highly populated cities like East Providence, they have no restriction on the number of cats. I know plenty of people, and I couldn't handle it myself, but I know plenty of people with over 10 cats, and you walk into their house and it's spotless. You could eat off the floor. All the cats are up to date on shots, they're spayed and neutered, they've been tested for feline AIDS and leukemia, everything. There was a case in Johnston. Lady had over 10 cats, taken to court. She won the court case because she was able to present documentation that the cats were already fixed, shots, everything up to date, healthy, and the judge threw it out. And that's going to happen. That's going to happen. And we're against the bill. we already have something going on with hoarding, but as stated by another speaker, just because you have numerous number of animals doesn't mean you're a hoarder. Depends on whether or not you're taking care of those animals. And we don't want to hurt people who have over 10 cats, I don't think. We don't want to make them criminals. So I think this really should be left up to each city and town, because they've had no restrictions for a number of years since they incorporated, and there haven't been any problems. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, may I give our organization's comment on 7645 and 7646? Were you hearing that?
7646, quickly.
46. We feel it's not enforceable. How would you find out who has 10 cats in their house? So we're opposed to that bill.
Thank you very much. That concludes the hearings on 7132, 7646, 7258. Yes.
I'm sorry, Vice Chairman. I signed up for the asked to be put in by the SPCA. I just haven't had an opportunity to speak.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Come forward.
I know Representative Sakachi wasn't here to present originally.
I had signed up for those bills also. There was a page 2.
Oh, the page 2? Oh, Kim Casey right here, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's, where the heck is the other one?
No, that's
on the
it
other
right
bill.
here, she's the last one.
Yes. Is this,
Joe
was that? Yes. Joe and
Kim?
Kim? On 7132, which we already heard.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on these bills and add something that has not already been stated? Okay. Okay.
Come forward now or forever hold your peace.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thank you, sir. And I'll try to be brief. And this bill coincides with the hoarding bill, and I won't be redundant on the facts that I brought forth in that testimony. What I find interesting about this statute, and I've been taking a beating for this for a while, and it's interesting because with the exception of 2 or 3 municipalities in the state, every municipality limits the amount of dogs you can have to 3 or less unless you apply for a kennel license. No one in the state seems to take issue with the fact that 98% of the municipalities say you can only have 3 dogs. If you want to have more than 3 dogs, then you apply for a kennel license. We're trying to make this equivalent with cats. We're not saying you can't have more than 10 cats. All we're saying is if you want to have more than 10 cats, that you apply for a license through the town. We don't have a dog hoarding problem in the Rhode Island. I haven't had one dog hoarding case in 7 years. I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of cat hoarding cases. In every hoarding case we've had, they all tell you the same thing. I started out with 5, 6, 10, and the numbers just got out of control. What we're trying to do is be proactive here and prevent the situations that I spoke about in the hoarding testimony from happening. Again, not trying to prevent a responsible cat owner from having more than 10 cats. I wouldn't disagree that there are people that can take care of 10, 15, 20 and do that very well. All we're asking for is some regulation on that, and that if you want to do that, you apply for a license with the town, and that will afford them the opportunity to visit your property, ensure you have the correct space and the ability to take care of the animals properly. Thank you.
Just a question I have, is there going to be a fee for that permit?
I don't believe the statute accounts for that. It does say that municipalities shall establish an application for a license to own or keep more than 10 cats. So I believe it would be on a case-by-case basis, so it depends on each municipality. I don't know if there is a fee for a kennel license or if different towns the fees vary. Statutorily, it would be left up to the municipality to decide.
I'm sure it would be. Representative McLaughlin, a question.
Yes. Would this bill be proactive?
I believe it would be very proactive, yes.
When I say that, it's sort of like anything else. people that already, have the 10 cats.
Okay,
and it wouldn't be retroactive.
Right.
Okay.
And that brings up a good point, and I'd have to look at the wording in the statute if it accounts for that. We would certainly be open to some language that would be retroactive if the committee felt that was fair.
It's just, you can't penalize someone
Correct.
who already has 10 cats.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christy?
Thank you again. Christy Smith, Potter League for Animals, and I'm kind of out of sequence here because we've been jumping around on bills, and I'll just say quickly that there are two really nice sub-As for 7132 about abandonment of cats that really does make sense. And currently, animal control officers could fine any group, individual who is doing anything that looks like trap, neuter, and release. And by putting in a sub-A that really is a very well-drafted, thoughtful piece, it really protects people who are doing this, and it does not make animal control officers put them in a position where they have to charge people for abandonment when they're really trying to control a out-of-control number of cats. So the sub-A on 7132 I really appreciate. And 7258 with a sub-A, I think it's strong the way it is and needed to look at hoarding as a problem, as the SPCA knows when they reach out to shelters all over the state. We all try to pitch in and help, but the numbers, you get 50 cats at one time, it becomes a bit of a challenge. So definitely a sub-A and an issue around hoarding is important. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Yes, Kim.
Okay, thank you. 7646, Defenders of Animals is against this bill. As you know, I'm a member of Defenders of Animals. I do take issue with my colleague in support of this bill. Yes, there are dog limits throughout the state. Just because there are doesn't mean that, everybody in those municipalities is happy with those limits, but they do exist. In East Providence, where I live, there's no cat limit. Our animal control officer has never asked for a cat limit. We've never had a cat limit since our inception, and cats in most well cared for homes remain inside the home. So unlike a dog who may be a nuisance to the neighbors if you had 10 dogs in your backyard, the cats are of no nuisance to the neighbors. So making someone apply for a kennel license, which requires neighbor approval, fees, the entry of the dog officer into your home on a yearly basis because you have 10 cats that are not bothering anybody. And, what will happen? Someone walks down the street and says, well, I saw 8 cat heads in the window, so she might have 10, and then they just come in and look under your beds and in the closets where the cats are hiding and try to count them. And there just doesn't seem to be a reason for this because you're covering this in your care for animal bills. You're covering this in your hoarding bills. So if somebody is keeping an animal and not keeping it properly, there's already a law to cover that. There's already a prosecution for that. So all this really does is hurt the person who's taking good care of their cats that aren't bothering anybody else. And we have already, the SPCA has already mentioned that hoarding isn't about cat numbers, it's about the care of the cats. So when we're dealing with people who have cat numbers but well cared for cats, then we're not dealing with hoarding. So to compare that, the two bills, they're completely different and shouldn't be tied together for that purpose. On Bill 7258, the sub-A, I believe, is important. I believe that a hoarder it should have the mandatory psychiatric evaluation as they are repeat offenders, and just putting them through the criminal process isn't going to work. Regarding the releasing abandonment 7132. Most communities are already actively TNRing. I'm not sure why Tiverton had a problem, but if they do and they feel the wording is necessary, as long as we're specific to include humane rescue groups and people who are assisting cats so that they're covered just like licensed releasing agencies, I think that I would be in support of that. I'll change to wording. And I just always want to say this when I come here and we talk about anything that has to do with TNR or ferals, to thank the General Assembly for several years back passing the law that allows TNR, and to let you know that in communities where our animal control officers are active, where they are enforcing the spay-neuter law, and where they are working with rescue groups to TNR, we are seeing a big difference. In my community of East Providence, we are seeing a big difference. Our euthanasia rates are down. The homeless cat population is down. The amount of kittens we get into rescue is down. So it works. It takes time, but it's working. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I saw one other hand, I'm sorry, Chairman, that a woman in the back that, I don't know if she signed up, but come on up.
If she...
Did you have? Okay. Did you have anything new to add or any written testimony you can turn in? Very brief. Thank you.
Thank you. ACOs respond to a lot of complaints about dogs being left outside. We need clarity and uniform definitions and guidelines to ensure that each individual pet that's kept outside is treated humanely. We've been using the TAC scale for body conditioning already. This is just the weather part. We really need the guidelines for care of all the animals. That's 7061. The 7062, the Beagle Bill, just some tweaking. I know people who raise beagles, they sleep in bed with them, and they're the best beaglers in the world. I think that all dogs should be treated equally under the TACC TAC. Mandatory certification for ACOs wasn't up tonight, but I approve of that one. Most animal control offices are switching pets back and forth, and we are using a lot more humane societies to work within our shelters and move the dogs. And the mandatory counseling, yes. And the releasing agencies with the crimes of abandonment, the way the law is written, I'm glad it's going to be changed to a sub-A, because ACOs, we could do it too. We could spay and neuter our animals and let them go too. So I'm glad for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on 7132-7646-7258. Thank you very much for all the testimonies on these last 6 bills. We have one more to do, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Azzanaro. And if the clerk could please record, without objection, Representative Diaz will be in the affirmative on the vote to hold for further study. And with that, we have House Bill, our last bill of the evening, House Bill 7645 by Representative Filippi. And if you can remember, Representative Filippi, we all heard this last year. So if you have a brief description, and I will call up Dr. Scott Marshall, Rhode Island DEM, the state veterinarian at this time, who has signed up in support of your bill, Representative Filippi. So please proceed and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for graciously having this bill before the committee last year. I'll just be brief for the watchers at home. This bill allows certain animal owners to perform routine animal husbandry practices as authorized by the State Livestock Welfare Advisory Council. It's very simple.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Representative Filippi? Thank you very much. Doctor, please proceed.
Thank you. And
Dr. Scott Marshall.
I want to thank Representative Filippi for introducing this bill. It is a very important bill. Rhode Island stands unique in New England and unique in the country that we don't allow exemptions from the Veterinary Practice Act for certain routine animal husbandry practices by their owners. These kind of practices would include vaccinations, simple, common surgical practices that happen on farms, like castration of young piglets. That happens when piglets are only a few days old. Castration of sheep and lambs, again, that happens when the sheep and lambs, or the lambs and goat kids are only a few days old. The Rhode Island Livestock Welfare Council in 2014 established animal welfare guidelines to further guide when these procedures would need to be done, when a veterinarian would have to be involved, when it's appropriate for a farmer to perform them themselves. So there is some oversight through that body as well, and we feel that this act, if you do enact it, will benefit the animal welfare or the welfare of animals, because more animals will be subjected to proper vaccinations, et cetera. I do want to call into just bring up one situation that happened last year. I'm sure you heard of the bird flu that engulfed the Midwest, where literally millions of birds had to be euthanized. There was talk at the USDA level of promoting a mass vaccination program for animals so we wouldn't have to euthanize them. That would not have been possible in Rhode Island. It would have been illegal to have farmers vaccinating their own animals or have non-veterinary crews come in to vaccinate their animals under current law. So this amendment is timely and it's important. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. The next three witnesses, Dennis Tabella, Joanne Ronco, and Kim Casey, Defenders of Animals. Welcome. And Dennis, you're first out of the box. Up quickly. Please proceed. And if you could please try not to repeat testimony that was stated by the other witnesses, that would be greatly appreciated. Please proceed. Welcome, Mr. Tabella.
Chairperson, members of the HEW committee, are the members of this committee aware of what a farmer can do right now before this bill goes through or doesn't go through? Right now, a farmer can tie a band around the testicles of an animal and wait until they fall off and bleed without a veterinarian.
Is your button up, Mr. Tabella? Thank you.
I think so. Okay.
Now it is.
So right now, without this bill, a farmer can tie a band around an animal's testicles and wait until they fall off and bleed. Right now, without this bill, a farmer can pull a horn off an animal without a veterinarian. I don't want to know what can happen if this bill passes to farm animals. Because right now, a farmer can bury an animal on his or her property and nobody knows what happened to that animal. These farm animals have had some amount of protection for years. Why do we need now to let farmers do even more than they can do right now to farm animals? Here's the question, the real question. If you or I put a band around an animal's testicles right now and wait until they fell off, we would be charged with cruelty. If we pull the horn off an animal, you or I, we would be charged with cruelty. Why do we want to let farmers get away with even more than what they can do right now? We're opposed to this bill for humane reasons, nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tabella. Any questions for Mr. Tabella? Thank you very Mr. Price. From the country. Here it comes. Your microphone button up, please, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I understand your concern, but like that procedure you're talking about, what would be the difference if the vet does it or the farmer does it?
Probably, well, it would be more humane. We have animals neutered every day. It's certainly humane. The animal is put under, and there's no pain involved. There may be some discomfort after, but can you imagine the pain that an animal goes through with that procedure right now?
Right. I was thinking if the vet did that same procedure rather than the farmer doing
the vet wouldn't do it the same way. That's for sure. Definitely wouldn't do it the same way. It's inhumane. It's cruel, without a doubt.
Welcome. Kim, please proceed. Kim Casey, Defenders of Animals.
Yes. Yes, I just
in the East Providence. We adopted a cat there one year, and I love the criminal background check. I sweated it out a little, but for a cat, and it was had a healthy life, and it was a very good cat. So thank you for that. Please proceed.
I just wanted to mention the one thing that Dr. Marshall did mention was vaccinations. I think that that maybe could be taken separately from medical cutting procedures and removing horns and things. I mean, a simple vaccination might be something that would need to happen in order to inoculate animals properly. That's not a cutting thing. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And that could be a possible amended language. Thank you for that. Yes, please proceed.
In the interest of humane treatment of all animals, including farm animals, we've advanced with procedures in domestic animals. We should advance in procedures with farm animals. We should treat the animals that we raise and use for food humanely.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Thank you very much. Jalen Ruggieri, Situate Animal Shelter, was opposed to this. Kathy McElroy, Defenders of Animal, is also opposed to this. Robin L. Hall, Defenders of Animal, is also opposed to this, as is Rita Bina, Defender of Animals, also opposed to this, and that will be entered into the record. Thank you all for very concise and good testimony and good recommendations. That concludes the hearing on 7645. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's hearing, but before we go, we just want to recognize our committee for staying and having such patience for the evening. On my extreme left, Deputy Chair, Representative Grace Diaz of Providence. On my immediate left is Representative Ackerman, who is all Cumberland or a little bit of...
Cumberland and Lincoln.
And Lincoln. So Cumberland and Lincoln. My name is Representative Joe McNamara, Chair. On my right is the Vice Chair. Thank you so much tonight, Representative Azanaro, who is joined tonight by his grandson, Ryan, who we're pleased to see back. Ryan, looking great after some surgery, and we're all happy that you're back with us, Ryan. And on Representative Azanaro's right, we have my colleague from Warwick, Representative David Bennett, RN. So he was listening to some of the suggestions we were offering tonight, and I know he got enthusiastic about those. On our first row, we have Representative Jim McLaughlin of Cumberland and part of Central Falls. Thank you, Representative McLaughlin. On his right is our authority on all things in the country, Representative Price, who's West Greenwich, Exeter, and Richmond. Yes. Is that it? Richmond and a small part of Hopkinton. And a very small part of Hopkinton. But that could have a lot of farms there as well. So that's why he has a keen interest in these bills. Thank you. And on his right, we have Representative Fogarty, the former president of the South Kingston Town Council. And
I also have West Kingston, which has a lot of farmers down there.
And West Kingston with a lot of farms, and also an experience in pharmaceuticals. So those comments were very well taken, and a lot of good suggestions tonight for
legal
amendments.
Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Prescription pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. So thank you very much to all of the witnesses tonight for your patience with us and for your testimony that was very effective. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, there is.
The House Committee on Health, Education, and Welfare is adjourned. Thank you, and have a nice evening.